Although they're the antagonists of the stories, Disney villains hold a special place in our hearts. They're powerful, manipulative, but they're also pretty messed up. Stay tuned to see who is our #1 messed up villain. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to The Things. Now let's check out the origins of 10 Disney villains.
Do you want to be a DIY expert? Check out our friends at Crafty Hackers. They have the best hacks, crafts, and everything DIY. Watch their videos for the best household tricks, DIY decor, and fun recipes. If you love making crafts with your friends or just trying new things, they have everything you're looking for. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on any awesome hacks and crafts.
Maleficent. You can't deny that Maleficent is one of the most iconic Disney villains ever, but her story is messed up if you think about it. We've seen her powers in action and we've seen how she treats her daughter Mal. But do you know how she became a villain and why she is the way she is? Fairy tales often feature pretty girls whose life later gets destroyed by someone with a much uglier and meaner personality. Maleficent's story starts when she doesn't get invited to the christening party. Although the reason behind it is different, depending on which old version of Sleeping Beauty you read. Her reputation gets Maleficent known as the source of pure evil in all kingdoms, as well as the entire Disney universe. But the origin of her evil is pretty messed up. As we know it, it all started when she didn't receive an invitation to Aurora's christening party. She then put a curse on the baby Aurora and said she'll lose her life by the time she's 16. Talk about unreasonable evil. That's pretty messed up, isn't it? We're sure most people just shrug it off when they're not invited to birthday parties instead of becoming the source of all evil. Hades. Hades has quite a mysterious origin. So we'll talk about what we know and some of the theories the fans have about this god of wealth. This temperamental Greek god was probably one of the tamest Disney villains we've seen. But did you know how he actually became a villain after he was humiliated? We first see him when people are celebrating Hercules' birth. He makes a joke that didn't go down well with the public, and that was the start of his jealousy and rivalry. Out of all the villains, Hades' personality resembles a regular human the most. Well, apart from the fact that he wants to end Hercules' life and rule Olympus. But Hades isn't even that vengeful, as he's clearly out of ideas on how to get Hercules at some point in the movie. So the fact that he became vengeful just because he got laughed at by Greek gods is pretty messed up. Out of all Disney villains, he's the one that has the most fans that are actually pretty sympathetic. Although trying to end someone's life just because people couldn't take your joke is just a little bit extreme. We do still have a soft spot for Hades, as do many other fans out there, but he's still pretty messed up. Mother Gothel. When it comes to messed up, Mother Gothel is probably one of the most evil villains ever. Sure, you can argue that she wasn't as mean as some others, but that doesn't mean that what she did wasn't evil. Mother Gothel, whose original name is Madame Gothel, kidnapped a kid just so she could stay young forever. If that's not narcissistic, we're not sure what is. But it doesn't end there. Many have pointed out that Mother Gothel actually has a narcissistic personality disorder. Think about it. She wants to stay young so much, she'll do anything for it, including kidnapping a child and raising her in a tower. She locked her so-called daughter away in a tower for 18 years while she was able to go out as much as she wanted. And she didn't even feel bad about it. Talk about being completely messed up. What's even more interesting about this villain is that many humans actually possess the same type of disorder. Although, to be fair, if we saw a flower being created from a single drop of sunlight, we'd probably think it was magical too. But seriously, Mother Gothel was one messed up villain that only wanted to stay young. Claude Frollo. He might have a totally ordinary name, but he's not an ordinary guy. Claude is just straight up scary, and if you watched The Hunchback of Notre Dame, as a kid, you were probably really scared of him. Well, to be fair, most adults are still scared of him. Unlike most villains, Claude was one of the few that already held the power. He didn't need to rule the world or anything, he was already pretty powerful, but what he did want was more control. Claude's evil mind goes from knowing that no matter what he does, he was right. Whether it means taking another person's life or even burning down an entire city. If it's done because he wants control, it must be right. He's extremely manipulative and conniving, and he really doesn't care about anything or anyone. Well, except for having the control and having even more power. Sounds pretty scary, right? Of course, let's not forget that he tries to burn Paris after Esmeralda turned him down. He's definitely one of the craziest and most evil villains there is. Trying to burn down a city because someone doesn't want to be with you? Come on, there's no need to be this messed up, is there? Cruella de Vil. While some Disney villains don't have a lot of backstory that truly explains their origins, others definitely do, and it makes them even more twisted than you'd ever think. And Cruella de Vil is one of those villains. In the novel version of 101 Dalmatians, Cruella was expelled from school for drinking ink. Yep, you heard that right. She was drinking ink. The novel version of Cruella also loved eating the strangest food ever, like dark purple soup, black ice cream, and a lot of pepper. Cruella's also different from other villains, as she doesn't have any special powers and she's not a schemer. She just really hates dogs, and she really wants the puppies. Seriously, it's pretty messed up. She actually wanted the puppies and not the adult dogs because the fur of the puppies is actually softer. Disney fans have also theorized that it's easier to steal puppies than it is to steal grown dogs, which makes a good point, but it's still extremely twisted. Who would have thought that this messed up villain would actually become one of the most iconic Disney villains ever? And how on earth was she able to find someone to make a child with? Actually, don't answer that. We really don't want to know. Jafar. Sure, Jafar is messed up, but you have to admit that his fancy look combined with his evil ways is pretty amazing. He's a part-time magician, an amateur seer, charming, slick, but also sick. Or at least that's how others described him. There isn't much to Jafar in terms of complexity of his character. Sure, he's the almighty villain, but overall, he's actually just another character that seems to want nothing but power. He betrays Aladdin and then at some point wants to take his life. Seems pretty standard for Disney villains, right? Not much is known about Jafar's past, but we found a messed up theory that might explain more about his origin. A writer named John Negroni stated that Jafar might have been good all along. The writer argues that Jafar seems to be hypnotizing the Sultan to do his job. Think about it. Jafar wants to become Sultan by wishing it, or marrying into it, which isn't exactly evil, is it? The writer also argues that the story has a different point of view if you see it from Jafar's perspective. So perhaps the messed up story of Jafar isn't so messed up after all. It's the fact that there might be more to Jafar than you might know. The Evil Queen. We're getting closer to our number one. The Evil Queen has a similar messed up narcissistic personality like Mother Gothel does. She's this vain character that wants nothing more than to be called the fairest of them all, and she does it at every price possible. But her story is actually messed up. In older versions of Snow White, the Evil Queen is actually pretty positive and not portrayed as such a messed up character. But in the Grimm version, the Queen actually orders the huntsman to end Snow White's life. They take pity on her after capturing her and instead bring organs of an animal to the Queen. The Evil Queen then eats those organs. Yep, how messed up is this? It gets even worse when you realize she was meant to eat organs of a human. The apple doesn't play a part in the game until way after the Queen realizes she has no other options than to go after Snow White herself. And what's even more messed up is that she actually kind of succeeds in her goal. After all, she was able to make Snow White eat the poisoned apple, right? That gets pretty close to being one of the craziest villains ever, doesn't it? Ursula. And here comes the biggest bad of them all. You have to admit that Ursula is one fabulous Disney villain. Ursula's character is based on the Sea Witch character of the Little Mermaid story by Hans Christian Andersen. But the Sea Witch in that story was actually pretty neutral and didn't play a big part, which is also why we never get to learn about the real backstory of why Ursula is the way she is. Ursula might not have the trident, but she's still pretty powerful. She's able to create potions and spells as she pleases, which is pretty cool. She also seems to have weird control over the weather and can create some pretty awesome storms. So why is she the big bad? Well, she wants to manipulate those powers to rule the seas and overthrow King Triton in the process. In the early adaptations of the movie, we learn that Ursula was actually King Triton's sister and Ariel's aunt. In the TV series, it's implied she wanted to create copies of the trident and overthrow King Triton that way. But of course, it didn't quite work out, which is why she wasn't a part of King Triton's family anymore. Ursula decided to choose power over the love for her family, and if that's not messed up, we're not sure what is. Captain Hook. Captain Hook is different than most villains. Sure, he might seek vengeance like some of the others, and he still might be the big bad. But what Captain Hook has that others don't is a pretty interesting origin story. Hook wasn't his real name. It, of course, became his name after he got the hook on his arm. His real name is actually James, which isn't as magnificent, but the actual story is slightly different than the one you might know. Hook kidnaps Wendy, which is how he ends up dueling Peter Pan. He is defeated and has to choose between surrendering or ending his life. He chooses the latter and throws himself into the jaws of the crocodiles. And that's how the story ends. But in other series, the story is just a beginning. We all know Captain Hook lost his hand because Peter Pan chopped it off and threw it to the crocodile with an alarm clock inside his mouth. In fact, that's why Hook wants revenge, because of his arm, not because he wanted to just fight Peter Pan for whatever reason. It's also been noted that Captain Hook could actually have post-traumatic stress disorder because of the events. It really makes you feel for the messed up life Captain Hook leads, doesn't it? Scar. But our favorite Disney villain is without a doubt Scar. Scar is manipulative. He's cunning, he's got that evil look, he's vengeful, and he wants power. He's what you would call the perfect villain. We know that Scar's real name is actually Taka, which means waste in Swahili. Taka got his name Scar after he managed to get a scar when he jealously tried to fight Mufasa's team of buffaloes. After finding that out, is there still any wonder that this lion became a magnificent villain that actually took the life of his own brother and overpowered his throne? We don't think so. But that's definitely messed up. In the animated series version of The Lion King called The Lion Guard, we learn that Scar was actually previously selected as the leader of the Lion Guard. But even back then, the power got to his head. He abused his power so much he actually lost him, which made him become even more evil and even more depressed. But it still didn't stop him from wanting to rule his kingdom. Unlike other villains, Scar succeeded in his plan and ended Mufasa's life in a battle not a lot of us can actually forget. And that's precisely why he's our #1 messed up villain. What do you think? Which one of these villains is your favorite? Let us know in the comments. And that's all for our video. Don't forget to subscribe to The Things and tell us how you felt about this video. Thanks for watching. See you next time.